Every business decision, big and small, is made by taking data, distilling it into useful information, and turning that into knowledge and wisdom. Whether we make decisions based on new information in front of us or by gut feel, it always comes back to data. Sometimes we call that intuition, but the reality is that our intuition is always built on data that we've collected through experience. My name's Anthony Caruana, and today I'm going to be joined by Robin Borelli, the Head of Financial Services Practice at CI&T, David Huggett, the Strategy and Digital Transformation Director at the Budweiser Brewing Group, and Leo Abdallah, the Business Director at CI&T. In this 30-minute discussion, we're going to explore how to build a data-driven culture. So Robin, what is a data-driven culture?
Thank you. So thank you for having me here. So I think what truly defines a data-driven culture is embracing data at all levels of the organization. And that's not just, we have a data group. That's a very siloed approach that can have limited impact. Instead, data is really infused into the DNA of an organization from the executive level down. They're hiring the right talent, maybe from outside the industry, to bring a fresh perspective. They're making sure data is accurate and accessible so that people will actually trust it and use it. They're prioritizing upskilling employees so they're comfortable using these increasingly sophisticated tools, understanding the importance of good data and its uses so that they can then collaborate, glean insights, and make informed data decisions versus relying on gut alone. And so this turns data into a true competitive advantage that helps you drive innovation and faster, more accurate business decisions.
So David, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think covers it nicely. I think, invariably it is around the business of business leaders being able to interpret that data and really helping inform their business decisions. And I think the key other element I would say is that that data is informed necessarily in real time. So you're starting to look at data that's not only looking backwards, but also starting to say what's happening right now and inform your decision about what you're about to do. And the final comment I'd just add is that it really needs to be core to that business success. So when the business looks at the things that they've done and the achievements they've done, that they know that's been heavily informed through data.
That's great. Thanks so much, David. Leo, do you have any comments on data-driven culture?
Yeah, I do, of course. Thank you for having me. I guess David and Robin, they cover it all, but just to complement, for me, I think it's when you have a combination of governance, support, education, stimulus, or even rewards and actions about the importance of using data to drive, to improve every decision-making process in the business. It's about, like Robin said, nurturing the mindset of using data across the organization, the mindset of transforming data into information, knowledge, wisdom. It's about setting priorities, building habits, and making those habits easy to be actioned. It's when you have, for example, like top-down support, and you have data analytics skills not just being isolated in a silo within your business, but contributing to other parts of your organization. And also, like I mentioned before, data being accessible so people are keen to use it. And also investing in education, data literacy, making sure that your employees, whoever is working with you and for you, understands the power of data, and as well as data management for metadata. So what does it mean? What that KPI means? What those three words mean? How do we calculate that? If you don't show to people what it means, the importance of that specific metrics, if you will, how come you can instill the culture of the healthy habits of working with data, right? So I think those are the main components in a nutshell.
So obviously, Leo, data is at the heart of creating a data-driven culture. How do you know you've got the right data?
That's a good question. I think you should be focusing on the questions you're trying to answer. And moreover, if you are asking the right questions in the first place, you have to be able to at least have an idea about your true north. Where do you want to go? What you're trying to achieve. Obviously, you can use data to help you to understand that. but you need to have something to start with. So if you don't know where you want to go, it doesn't matter where you're heading, right? It's just like Alice in Wonderland when she's talking to the cat, right? So I guess at the end of the day, at the core, I would like to think there's always a business problem. And that business problem will, whether you like it or not, gently force you to come up with the questions, you know, because when you identify more or less what seems to be a problem in your mind, you start asking questions in your mind, you know, how did it happen? And then you look into this descriptive data and things like that. So trying to pinpoint the business problem and take it from there, looking into the answers or the right answers to be asked. And then I guess naturally, it will take you to the process of understanding what you need to know to be able to answer to those questions. And I think that's something you should start with without jumping into, you know, picking the right tools or the right software and things like that. Start with the business problem. I guess that will probably be my biggest piece of advice here.
And Leo, I think just to build upon that, I think you know, having very clear direction around what your true north is going to be critical. Right. I think a lot of organisations struggle with is just the sheer amount of data that is available for them, right, across multiple sources, whether that be internally, you know, in different systems, or whether it be external data factors. And I think the risk a lot of organisations have when they try to decide what the right data is, not having that true vision on what north is. And secondly, then trying to just get all the data into one central location, and then trying to crunch and analyse that data. And so I think the additional build that I would say is really important that you work, when we're trying to determine what the right data is, we're certainly working back with the teams from a collaboration perspective. You know, the technical teams who are structuring the data, are cleansing the data, to the commercial teams that then are starting to look at that data and to help to inform the decisions it's made. I've seen many examples where, you know, we've sort of posed a business question. Teams have gone away and sort of try to analyze that data. They come back with a response, and that response seems to be very different to the question that was originally asked. And that's because invariably the two teams aren't working together and in an agile nature. And so, you know, I'd say certainly when you help defining what is the right data, you know, having the true north is critical, and then also being really clear on the type of data and how you're going to analyze that data. So I think that's important. The other thing that I will also say that, you know, how do you know from an organization perspective whether you've got the right data? I often think about the sort of business engagement in this process. And so, you know, is the business going to a point where they don't consider data? You haven't got the right data when they're not even looking at it, right? They're not engaged, they're not motivated, versus they're playing a little bit of lip service. Okay, let's have a look at see what the data is informing. Versus you start to see an increase in interest, excitement, and advocacy, where the business is then saying this data is really important. And that's when you know you've got the right data operating in the right way, giving you the right insights, because you've got leaders back in the business who are asking those questions. So true north, making sure your data is well structured, and then it's that level of engagement, I guess, through the business.
Yeah, I completely agree, David. And just, you know, and you said it very well, like, and that connects to what we're saying just before, which is making sure that your data team is not isolated from the rest of the business, right? Because then you won't be agile, you know, you won't be sharing the same objectives. You won't have the contacts that they won't have the contacts that they need to be able to address, in this case, the business problem, right? And just something that came to my mind, I remember reading this quote back in the day. It was like, trying to analyze a huge amount of data without any structure, any plan. It's like trying to drink a sip of water from a fire hydrant. You know, you probably get drowned. So that's the feeling, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting, Robin. You know, I like the Alice in Wonderland and the cat analogy or metaphor there that Leo brought in. But imagine that the cat and Alice have had a really great conversation and they've kind of got a good idea of now they've got the right data. How do they actually use it? I mean, what can you do with it once you've got it?
Right. It's this. So now what? Right. I have this. I'm behind it. I have this embarrassment of riches, and what do I do? And I think, Leo, you hit something key with having data at the heart of the organization and this idea of collaboration. And I can speak to from a financial services perspective, like particularly banking, there's so much focus right now on how do we make it easier for customers to kind of manage a fractured, siloed experience. Let's keep improving, this front end, and how do we make it easier for them to complete tasks, when really you can go the next level down and say, how can we use data to actually not have a fractured experience? And one of the things we talked about is we've seen this evolution in data, right? From, hey, tell me what happened. And then moving to, can we anticipate, what people will do next and support them? And then really the best step is, how do we, proactively guide the customer holistically, and how do we understand them? And so I'll give an example from banking. Like there's this idea of, customer lifetime value. And right now there's a lot of siloed of, I understand what's happening from a debit and credit perspective, or mortgage or wealth management. And while there are certain limitations from a fiduciary perspective, there's a lot that you can do. So like, I'll give an example of someone who pays off their credit card every month. They get reward points, Visa or MasterCard make money, the bank doesn't. But if the debit, deposit account side and credit, you knew what was every product that someone had, then you could say something like, what, if you use your debit card, I'll give you a small cash kickback. So they feel like they've got something from the bank. The bank knows me, they know what I have, and they've rewarded me. And as the bank, I'm able to, make some money on the interchange fees that way. And then there's things of just helping people proactively managing their finances. You have so much about me, give me some insights, and not just here's what we're reporting back to you, but what should I do with this, to have better financial health and achieve my goals. And so if you do this, then you can really move the dial, and then you're increasing loyalty, encouraging that multi-account, relationship, all of these things that really help increase that stickiness. And I think we've all hit or had the experience of still data that is still siloed, where I don't know about you, but how many times have you gone on and you're offered, sign up for this credit card? It's like, I already have that with you, and those are moments of disengagement, and you can really turn it the other way, look at that holistic view, and really increase that loyalty and share wallet.
Is a big part of that then, Robin, moving away? I mean, the traditional view of reporting and using data was to tell me what happened yesterday or last week or last month. I mean, that's the shift we're seeing now, that when you're data driven, you're not looking at what happened yesterday to decide what's going to happen tomorrow. You're looking at what's happening now so you can decide what to do next. Is that the really big shift you're seeing?
Absolutely. And there's also some things like that we've played with in the past. Like initially, an organization I was working with, when we talk about the embarrassment of riches, there was kind of a bit of a standoff between data and business on, well, what do you want to know? Well, what can you tell me? Well, what do you want to know? And then once we started to get traction, it was even sometimes some of those micro moments, like if we know that someone has their paycheck coming in, for example, and we know every month when it comes in at direct deposit, but we also see some of their bills coming through, or maybe some checks they've written, and they're at a risk of having overdraft fees. Let's not charge them that. Let's take what we know that they may not see for the timing and offer them an in the moment bridge loan, for example, do you want a small credit line, to support this? And I think anything that you can do as well for not just what's happening right now and how do I support you, but what are things that we can see with this richness of data that, the consumer or client may not see themselves, where you can help give them guidance.
I think, Robin, I love that sort of hyper personalization, that ability to, no longer sort of create sort of cohorts or segments that are at a big level. You can get to a micro level, and you're having the right conversations with the right customer at the right time. And what I also love about what you're articulating is the shift between that whole omni experience. So, I interact with you in many different ways. So I either maybe go on your app, or I might phone the call center, or I might physically go to the bank, but you know me no matter where I am. And that's the richness of data and the ability to take that in real time. So if someone does something just the moment before they walk through the bank, we do that in terms of when we send our sales teams into an outlet, we're sending digital content to customers that are engaging, they're buying, but the conversation will fundamentally have to change And it just feels very real. And I guess to your point, it's that personalization piece that's super exciting.
You hit on something critical there too, which is also, it's not just about how you're empowering your customers or clients, but also your employees. So we see this in banking as an example. You start to fill out an application in the mortgage process. It's tricky. If you have something like this that's centralized and data, is going to different groups, somebody could walk in to a branch and you could help them complete it. There's nothing worse than, being blind to what's happening and not being able to, to support someone. Or you can, real-time reactions can also be behind the scenes, like, gosh, we noticed that where people are getting stuck at this point in a process, or we have a weird thing with the approvals, too many people are getting through or not enough. You can find those choke points and adjust them real time versus catching up to it a month later when, you've potentially had a loss of potential customers and, some
and I think you're right. It fundamentally not only changes the customer experience, but it really makes you as a business look at yourself, right? What are the processes that are breaking down? What does the experience really should look like? So what's important from a customer perspective rather than a business perspective, because that's actually in the best interest of the business. And data and behavioral based insights can really help inform that. And I think that's why it is so exciting. Complex, but super exciting.
So we've worked out what data we need. We've worked out that there's a difference between easy to get data and quality data. We've worked out where the value of this can come from through some of the things that you and Robin have just discussed around being proactive about customer needs and understanding and anticipating those journeys and putting all that together. So David, how do I start? Because it kind of feels like I'm about to start trying to eat an elephant. And I know the answer is one bite at a time, but where's the first bite? Where do I get going?
I think it's like any transformational journey, right? I think you sort of have to think about, ask the questions about where have you been in the past, where are you today, and where do you want to go in the future, right? So I always start with sort of that position because you're always going on a journey, right? It's continually evolving, and the first thing I think it's worth reflecting on the past. What's worked well, what's not worked well. What are the business barriers, because they will certainly help you. Just make sure you structure yourself in the right way. I think it's the second piece for me was being really clear when you're building a plan is like, what are the business needs and what are your objectives? So as Robin, as Leo said, making sure you're really clear on that North Star. And for me, that's about being inquisitive, asking lots of questions. What are we trying to do? If we got all this data, what is our business objective? Why are we trying to capture that data? What are we going to do with it? Just because we have this data and we have this insight coming back, is it going to change our behavior? And then being really clear on who's going to use it, and when do they need it by? And if I use the example, recently we were doing a lot of stuff around NPS and CSAT scoring, so understanding customer satisfaction and engagement, where you can start to do that proactively by asking customers. But the real objective in that journey was to try and get to a point where we could predict before the customer became disengaged because of what we learned by proactively asking them, so we could then inform some of the decision making. And I think, in terms of that plan, you could see there was a very clear vision in terms of stage one, which was proactively asking the customer, get their feedback, understand how that might influence the behavior, and then starting to automate some of those processes. So I think certainly there's a structure to that. We have to be clear on what success looks like. So it's always nice when you're going into that journey that we articulate that as a collective group. Start small, prove out your business case, and then obviously build out from there. And I think the final point I would say is be clear with communications. I think any digital driven culture is around sharing your successes and your learnings, because you're not going to be successful on everything that you do. And actually, saying we have made a mistake, but we've learned from that mistake. A/B testing is critical for that, and take not only your team but also the broader organization on the journey, because I think that will drive engagement in terms of the plan you're trying to do. So, I think be very clear. It's a transformational journey, and I think hopefully there's a number of things there that help in some of the decision making.
So in a really practical way then, and I'm not sure if this is a David or a Leo thing or a Robin thing, so whoever feels like they've got an answer for this question, pipe in. But is one of the things you've got to start with is thinking about the sorts of questions or problems you're trying to solve. So as an example, when I go and shop online and I buy, for example, I've got to go and buy a new bike helmet. So I go onto a shopping site and I start searching for bike helmets. Is the next thing actually and say, hey, but that person's looking for a bike helmet. should they also be looking at some other piece of safety equipment or a bike computer and actually thinking about that broader need? Is it about actually putting yourself in that customer's position and then saying, right, if they're doing that, what are the things that they might want to do? And then actually using that as a jumping off point. So you can think about, well, what data do I need? What intelligence do I need? And how do I actually put all those things together? Is that kind of the process you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say very much so, right? If you think about that customer journey, you are trying to predict. Well, first of all, is understanding where they've come from, right? And so where do they come into the funnel? So as they come from different locations, that also may inform the sort of the future direction you take them. Are they earlier in that decision making, or have they been actively looking for some time? And then secondly, I think the other key piece for me here is you as an individual may have a view about how you want to guide them, but use the data to tell you, are they engaging with the direction you're taking them? And if they're not engaging, and often A/B testing is a really good example of that, where you'll put a couple of different scenarios to them and you'll get some context around customers are engaging heavier with this type of response versus this type of response. And so, I think, certainly, yes, you are trying to guide them on that journey, to help inform them, but see how they respond. That's also really critical.
I agree with David 100%, and with Robin as well. I guess at the end of the day, if you do it right, and you have the technology to be able to do it right, you migrate from a descriptive type of analytics to a diagnostic, all the way to a predictive and to the prescription. So you turn the data into something actionable, so you can recommend like the bike helmet and things like that. But something I think Robin was mentioning before, and David touched on that, with the right plan, the right structure, the right technology, you can potentially get to the level of the individual. Because you can work with cohorts, you can create the personas, your groups and things like that. But if you do it right, you may potentially get to the level of the individual, and that's when you get the one-on-one recommendations, when you have the individual, what we call a database of affinity, and then based on that, you can transform your, like I said, the descriptive data into a prescription. You'll be proactive in recommending something to someone, to the individual. I think that's the beauty of it. And to be able to do it, obviously, you have to think about automation. You need to think about doing the brilliant basics the best way possible. So you spend your time with your data scientists, with your data team, working, holding hands with the business on what adds more value, with the interpretation of the data, with like establishing the data sets, the measures, the metrics, everything that is relevant to you within the context for that individual, if that makes sense.
Yep, that's perfect. Thanks, Leo. So just on that, I mean, you touched on technology and all those sorts of things there. I mean, we're talking about tools now that can gather lots of data from lots of different places, distill it into useful information that can help make this better decisions. And we are talking about, being a data-driven organization. Can you maybe just very quickly touch on a couple of the things that you need to look for in the toolkit that you require to make this happen?
Sure. I think, it's paramount that the tools that they are tools that, at the end of the day, they empower people to ask the right questions and find the answers independently, right? So as we're mentioning before, if we look at those, I think 5 pillars, some of us mentioned before, so tools that help the data to be accessible, right? So it's easy for people to use it, because if it's a very difficult tool to use, or obviously you need specialized people to do it, but for the rest of the business, it's easy to action on that data because it's accessible. So make the data accessible, tools that one way or the other help you to tackle the education piece. Maybe there's like a community around it. Maybe there are like trainings available, not just about the tool itself, but the data mindset. Look for that, because that really helps. And also tools that will help you do a better management in terms of your metadata, the description of the data. Like I said before, you may have your KPIs, you may have your measures and your metrics, but how do you translate that into something that people understand? And the tool needs to be able to do that in a very educational way, if that makes sense. And also tools that at the end of the day will help the top-down support, because like a data-driven culture, it needs to come like it's a two-way, right? So, but it starts with the top down, and then as you nurture that at the bottom of your organization, it starts to flourish up as well. But tools that will help the leadership team to instill that into the rest of the business, and also at the end of the day, tools that will, one way or the other, again, will help your data team not to be isolated from the rest of the business. Tools that will actually enable them and will help them and assist them to be communicating well with the business, so they can use that to have rich discussions with the business, to collect feedback and make sure that they are working on the right piece of data or looking into the right answers and looking for answers to the right questions, as we mentioned before. I guess that's in a nutshell what I would suggest.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we're coming close to the end of our time, and I have one final question for each of you. And I'm going to ask Robin to go first on this one, but I'm going to give you each about a minute to answer. What does that look like when you get this right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm oversimplifying this, but I would say if it impacts your bottom line, you could say, oh, we're structured the right way, we're all collaborating, but if you're making better decisions, then you should see business lift, right? You're attracting more new customers, you're keeping the ones you have and increasing their satisfaction and share of wallet by creating these helpful products and experiences, giving that insight and guidance that just makes it really simple to, take action, make better decisions, and achieve their goals. To me, that's what right looks like.
Perfect. Thanks, Robin. David?
Yeah, it's hard to build from that. I think the core to the business success, I think, is fundamental, which was what Robin just said. But I think where I got excited when data became quite central to the business is when people started leveraging some of the facts and the insights that you provided for them in the bigger business. You talk about individuals going through that sort of journey of lip service, to a level of interest, to an excitement, to an advocate. When they became advocate of the data and they started saying, I remember one scenario where the CEO started talking about 74% of our campaigns were driven through our digital marketing capability. And it was like, you could know that they were at another level. They really were engaging in that. They could see how it was impacting their business, and they were bringing that data to life. I think that's when you get excited. That's when it's starting to embed well within your culture.
So you've got the challenging position, Leo, of going last. So far we've got the bottom line. And I think if I summarize David into 2 words, it's happy people. Where do we go from there, Leo? What do you think success looks like?
I think, well, I guess David and Robin, they pretty much cover it all, but just, repeating them here. I think it's at the end of the day, if you're evolving, if you're becoming better, if, for example, you're able to identify cost reductions that you can make, if you're able to uncover new ways of establishing new revenue streams and things like that, because you have the data, because you're doing your homework, it's probably because you're doing the right way. I think something to point out, though, is do not, being peace, do not try to boil the ocean, because obviously it's easier said than done, right? So it may most likely be the case you will start small, but at least if you can, it's almost like a recursive function in software development, right? If you can use your data management framework to guide, to provide governance for your data adoption process or culture, and measure your progress, even if it's a small progress. But if you can capture that, that's a great sign that it's working, and you should be doing that, and you should improve and you should be doing more of that. But also keeping in mind that if you have to change something, you are able to change it, right? So I guess I would summarize it is, if you know and if you're able to know that you're evolving, I guess that's probably how I would wrap it up.
So if I take all three of those, I think we've got a culture of continual improvement with people that are happy at what they're doing, and that's got a positive impact on the bottom line.
Great.
So, yeah. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. That was a really interesting conversation. There was a lot of great insights, and hopefully for all the people who are listening today, they've come away with this with some really good, solid, actionable advice. I want to thank our three speakers today, Robin, David, and Leo. And thank you to all the people who are listening in today. I hope you all have a great day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.